Now, Taoiseach Micheál Martin has signalled a potential end to the rent pressure zones next year. But what would this mean for Ireland's housing market, which remains as precarious as ever?
A headline today, Cabinet to consider tax breaks for investment in housing. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Lorcan Sirr, Senior Lecturer in Housing at TU Dublin. Lorcan, it is lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the end of these rent pressure zones, about 17 around the country. What exactly are they? What have they been doing?
Yeah, rent pressure zone covers about 75% of the country, and if your rental property is in a rent pressure zone, the rents can go up once a year, but only by 2%. Right, 2% for investors though is a good rate of return, and it's guaranteed because people use the 2% as a ceiling, not as a maximum. If you know what I mean, we're just going to put it up by 2%. And if you're outside the rent pressure zone, it's 4% every 2 years. So that's what a rent pressure zone is, and it's worked fairly well in stabilising rent increases, like taking the heat out of total acceleration. Like, it hasn't made them come down or anything like that. But what it has really done is also prevented people exiting into homelessness and things like that, because it has moderated the rate of inflation of rents.
So why would Micheál Martin be saying that they might scrap it by the end of this year?
The landlords don't like it. Effectively is what it is. And the corporate landlords in particular, the large, you know, if you drive around Dublin, Galway, Cork, you'll see these large blocks of apartments that are built just for renting. So in Dublin City Council, I only have the figures for 2023, 94% of all new housing in Dublin in 2023 was apartments for rent, social apartments, but also a lot of thousands of built to rents. Okay?
Sorry, say that again?
94% of all new housing in Dublin City Council area in 2023 was apartments. So that means that young people in particular, but everybody who's looking for a house, right, to buy, because this is what we do. If you own your own house in Ireland, you're 60 times wealthier than if you rent.
Yes.
Okay? So people own their own homes, they pass them on to their kids. That's the way we do it in Ireland. All those people are then moving out to the greater Dublin area, from Wicklow to Louth, and increasingly now into Westmeath and increasingly into Longford. And what are they doing? He gets in the train and comes into work, right? And she drops off the kids at the mammy, the creche, the mother-in-laws, all that kind of stuff, and drives. So now they have two cars, which is totally unsustainable. So we have sprawl, and then we have that kind of forced car ownership and all the stuff that goes with that.
So these buy-to-let apartments, which are happening all over the country as well.
Mostly in the large urban areas, but yeah.
And we have been told, heard Micheál Martin talking about the other day, that we need more investment. We need tax breaks for investment in housing. Does buy-to-let work?
Well, remember, they already pay no tax on their rental income. You know, this is what a lot of people
corporate
don't understand.
Landlords.
Yeah, these large institutional landlords pay no tax on their rental income. And when the average rent is $2,500 a month, that's a lot of money coming in. So what further tax breaks they need is going to be quite interesting. Look, it's really interesting to hear Fianna Fáil and Micheál Martin say this, because traditionally Fianna Fáil, the Republican Party, republicanism is always about, you know, fighting the landlords, fighting for, you know, the right to own your own land, the right to own your own home. And now we see the so-called Republican Party doing a total 360 and coming around to being the party of the corporate landlords. It's really, really surprising. Our home ownership rate, right? We had one of the highest home ownership rates in the country at 81% back in 1991. It's now 65%, so it's below the European average. Okay, now home ownership in Ireland is your wealth, remember that. Yeah. And what we're seeing that is that plummeting in the last years. What we don't need is more apartments to rent. We have hundreds of thousands of people who are in the rental sector who want to own their own homes.
So sorry, what's our home ownership standing?
About 65.5% now.
And the EU average is
79%.
Right, so we're well below that.
No, sorry, 69%.
In a country that prides itself
on home ownership.
And
it's our wealth. Tommy, that's the thing.
Yeah,
so if we're looking at, obviously, the government all last year were promising that we're going to have 40,000 homes, we're going to have 300,000 over the next 5-year term, whatever else, we hit 30,000, well below those targets.
Yeah.
If we're saying we need investment in housing, if we're going to try and hit the targets, like, is 300,000 enough? Whenever Davy wrote just a few weeks ago about Ireland needs to build 93,000 new homes every year to keep up with demand.
These targets are somewhere between aspirational and pie in the sky, and I'll tell you why, right? Because, yeah, surely on paper, okay, when you look at the amount of people that are in the country and the population expansion, and you divide that by the amount of housing that we need, sure, 93,000 a year, whatever, it could be 193,000 a year, because we don't have the infrastructure to supply it. So in the greater Dublin area, we're already at 99% of our water capacity every day. So in other words, if there's a good rugby match on or a good episode of Coronation Street and everybody in two housing estates goes out to put the kettle on, those taps will go dry. Okay, we're that close to the edge. So where the rest of the water is going to come from for these 93,000 houses, or half of them, because half the houses end up in the GDA, the Greater Dublin area, every year. Nobody has answered that question yet. So the numbers are
They're diverting the Shannon, Lorcan. You know they're diverting the Shannon.
For the last 20 odd years.
So can I ask you, because like I've been trying to buy a house for years, and you're kind of sitting there going, what is happening? You trust the government to know what they're doing. We just voted them back in again. They're saying that we need more tax breaks, private investment. What should we be doing? Because people are stressed. Every time I talk to someone, it's stress, stress, stress.
Yeah, really what we should be doing, the people in Ireland, like we have a great tradition in Ireland of building. And particularly we've got an awful lot of small to medium-sized builders who have been pushed aside and neglected in house building over the last 10 or so years in favour of the large house builders. And okay, that's fine. But really what those people need is access to money. One of the problems that small builders have in particular is going to a bank and being able to borrow money. Okay. Now, the Irish government have a thing called Home Building Finance Ireland. It's a part of the Strategic Investment Fund. It's part of the state coffers, and they lend out money. The problem is they lend out money at 9, 10, 11%, the same as you get in AIB or Bank of Ireland. So it's of no benefit to anybody. And that's in their legislation that they have to lend it at these kind of rates, matching the rates of AIB and everybody else. So you'd wonder what the point of them is then, really. So really what needs to happen is that, these small to medium enterprise builders need to be allowed to access money at rates that they can afford to repay and that they can afford to borrow over 2 years. And we need to put the emphasis back on building homes for people. Now, whether they're apartments or whether they're houses, I don't mind. But they need to be available for the likes of yourself or whoever to go out and buy, not to rent. You don't want to be paying $2,500 a month rent for the rest of your life.
We're seeing the pictures here from Kildare when the houses went on sale last week. People were queuing in their cars from Tuesday to get the house. They were gone by 7 a.m.
The reason they're queuing is, and a lot of people don't understand this, that out of the 30,000 that we built last year, only about 8,000 of those are actually going to end up, like we see in the picture there, as new homes in your local estate agent window, right? The rest will be one-off houses, which are mostly in the countryside. There'll be social housing, and there'll be build-to-let. Which are obviously not for sale. So that's a huge problem, that only about 30% of all the new housing that we build every year comes to the market. So that's a real issue.
So listen, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the water, we don't have the shortage of GPs, we don't have the builders. Yeah. Our population is growing exponentially as well. What are we going to do? Well, government? Micheál Martin saying to his government ministers, prepare to deliver bad news. What is the bad news that the government needs to deliver to try and solve this?
Well, I think they're always delivering bad news, including 30,000 instead of 40,000. But one of the issues, though, is that on the labour front, right? When you think about it, we need to grow a whole generation of new, apprentices, electricians, and plumbers, and plasters, all those really good skills that we need. They get paid something like €5.60 an hour when they're on their apprenticeships, and then it goes up in the second year, and that. Who would want to do that at an 18-year-old young guy or girl saying, I'm going to be an electrician, but I'm going to earn less than €6, half the minimum wage for 3 years? Nobody's going to do that. So we need to start treating apprentices with respect and make those kind of skills that we really need in the country more attractive for people. We've got loads of state land that we could better use around the place, and I think we need to knock the build-to-rent stuff on the head. They are not a positive contribution in my mind to the future security of Ireland's society.
And there's about 75 other things we need to talk to you about, and we don't have time, so hopefully you will come back and talk to us again. It's been a pleasure having you today. Dr. Lorcan Sirr, Senior Lecturer in Housing at TU Dublin. Thanks a million.
Thanks,
really appreciate it.